Hello, welcome. If you've somehow come across this channel by accident, My Blue Heaven, it's called, welcome. If you've just popped in here, clicked on this, wondering what it's all about, welcome as well. What I'm trying to do here, okay, is take a look at the retrospective look at the VFL/AFL draft since 1986 right up until 2021. I understand the draft is next week, the 2022 AFL draft, which is always exciting. But I wanted to have a look at, right the way through and take a look at, in particular, the top 10 draft picks through that period of time. It's been an interesting exercise so far. So this is part 5. I'm trying to identify the best ever picks taken with each selection inside the top 10. So it is a countdown as such. I went with Patrick Dangerfield as the best ever at 10, Martin Pike, the best ever at 9, Jimmy Bartel, the best ever at selection number 8, and Joel Selwood, the best ever at selection number 7. And I've reworked that now as well. I'm calling it the My Blue Heaven Power rankings inside the top 10. So Martin Pike has gone from 9 to 10. Bartel's gone from 8 to 9. Dangerfield slipped down from pick 10 to pick 8, and Joel Selwood remains in 7th position at the moment. Okay, so today in this episode, I'm going to try and find the best ever selection number 6 in the VFL/AFL draft 1986 through to 2021. I start with what I consider to be the not so notables. Now, this isn't a knock on any of these players. They just probably didn't set the world on fire. Although some of these I'm looking through now and thinking, well, they could have probably been pushed into the notable mentions. But who cares? For the sake of this, I'm going to go right from 1986. The not so notables. Richard Cousins was the first ever player selected at number 6. He was from South Australia. He was a forward turned ruckman, was drafted by Footscray and ended up playing for 5 seasons and racked up 60 games. He was a forward originally when he arrived at the Whitten Oval and ended up becoming quite a handy ruckman for 5 seasons. 1987, Andrew Buck Rogers from South Australia, drafted by Essendon, but it went to Geelong where he probably made his name at Cardinia Park. 83 games, 75 games with the Cats, and played in the losing 1992 grand final with Geelong against the West Coast Eagles, played in the back pocket. And in fact, that was his last game of AFL football. 1988, the Cats once again, they picked up a Western Australian, Ray Sterrett from East Fremantle, played 20 games for Geelong. And his first game was, in fact, a 95-point win for the Cats against the West Coast Eagles in round 2 of the 1989 season. Mark Brayshaw, the father of Andrew and Angus Brayshaw, Angus at Melbourne, Andrew at Fremantle. He was actually drafted to North Melbourne with selection number 6 in 1989, but only managed 32 games for North Melbourne. He was from Claremont. Alan Jakovich, he's been mentioned this before because he was drafted with pick 6 and then pick 9 throughout his career. He was a superstar. In 54 games, he amassed 208 goals, most of those with Melbourne. He should be in the notable mentions, but I've slipped him in there. 1991, Paul Burton didn't manage a game. Kid from Fremantle, 2 years on the Swans list, but didn't manage a game. 1992, Robert Pyman, another player who was fined for draft tampering. North Melbourne originally was selection number 6. Collingwood, Melbourne for a total of 40 games. 1993, Fitzroy picked up Trent Cummings. He ended up playing 29 games for both Fitzroy and the West Coast Eagles, was not part of that select group of players to go up to Brisbane when Fitzroy and the Brisbane Bears merged. Robert McMahon, another one from Fitzroy, who was in the same boat as Trent Cummings. Only played the 2 games for the Roys, wasn't selected by Brisbane, so he went to Hawthorn where he didn't manage a game. Daniel Healy in 1995 went to the Saints with selection number 6, ended up playing 38 games. But he was better recognised as a sample player and played in 5 winning premierships for the Central Districts Football Club when they had that huge dynasty there in the sample. John Rombotis, 1996, originally drafted with pick number 23 to Fitzroy, but was once again one of those players that wasn't selected to go up north. So Port Adelaide picked him up instead with selection number 6 when they first came into the AFL. He spent a bit of time there. In the end, played 48 games for 3 clubs, Fitzroy, Port Adelaide, and then the Tigers. Murray Rance from Shepparton, the Murray Bushrangers, hugely disappointing player for the Carlton Football Club, was selection number 6. Just the 5 games in 3 injury-riddled seasons at Princes Park. 1999, Damien Cupido, an exceptional talent. Very, very, very good player for Brisbane and Essendon. Probably should have been in the notable mentions, but he just didn't play enough football. He could just never really settle. 53 games, 66 goals. Born in South Africa, but shit, he was good. He was really good. Dylan Smith, 2000, from Woodend, North Melbourne and Fremantle, 21 games. 2001, Ashley Sampi, another that's a tad unlucky. Mark of the Year in 2004, part of the losing 2005 Premiership team with the West Coast Eagles. Wasn't selected in 2006. 78 games, 97 goals. Trained with Melbourne and North Melbourne. I think it may have been Melbourne in 2007, but the D's didn't pick him up because of weight issues. Tom Williamson, 85 games for Footscray as a big sort of centre-half back from Queensland, rugby background. He was more of an athlete than an AFL footballer, but he still managed 85 games, but was a tad overrated. 2005, disappointing Bo Dowler at the Hawks, just 16 games and 11 goals with selection number 6. And the following year, the Hawks did it again with selection number 6 in 2016 when they recruited Tasmanian Mitch Thorpe, who just played the 2 games at Hawthorn. He returned to Tasmania and became the youngest player ever in that league, in the Tasmanian Football League, to captain coach a premiership team. He entered the 2015 draft to try his hand in the AFL again, but no one picked him up. 2013, Matthew Scharenberg, just cruel, talented, but just cruel by 3 ACL injuries at the Pies. Ended up only playing the 41 games. And there must be question marks on both Caleb Marchbank and Aaron Francis, 2014 and 2015. Both very talented, particularly Caleb Marchbank, but only managed 52 games thus far and has just signed a 1-year deal to remain at the Blues. Aaron Francis is headed across to the Swans to try his luck there. But right here, right now, you'd have to say that Marchbank and Francis are probably in the not-so-notables. The notables, all right, let's go right back to 1997 and James Walker. You're probably thinking, who the hell's James Walker? He was a Ballarat boy. He went to Fremantle, played 151 games. He won the grand final sprint in 2003 and 2004. And he's the great-grandson of Gordon Coventry. After he was dead-listed by the Dockers in 2007, he actually decided to participate in some around-the-world yacht race. But he played 151 games of AFL football, which is not a bad effort. 2002, Stephen Salapak. They're not big names, are they? Stephen Salapak, 121 games for Port Adelaide, played on the wing in Port Adelaide's 2007 losing grand final. That that record margin against the Cats, 119 points. 2003, the much maligned whipping boy from the Bombers, Western Australian Kepler Bradley. 117 games and 87 goals overall. Went to the Dockers. Ended up being their leading goal kicker in 2011 with a massive 21 sausage rolls. 2007, David Myers. They're not jumping out of the page, are they? These selection number 6. David Myers from Western Australia. Went to Essendon, stayed at Essendon for his entire career, 123 games, was one of 34 players, was involved in the drug saga, so he was suspended for the 2016, came back after 2016, actually played probably his best football when he came back, returned and retired in 2019. He was serviceable. Chris Yarran, no more talented football going around. And what a waste, what an absolute waste. 119 games, 90 goals at both ends for Carlton. At one stage there was nearly one of the premier halfback flankers in the competition when Brett Bratton sent him back there, but could kick a goal. And he won the Goal of the Year in 2012, traded to Richmond for a first-round draft pick, and failed to play a game at the Tigers and fell into all sorts of trouble post his AFL career, which we're not going to go into. Gary Rowan, 2009, from Cobden, Geelong Falcons, selection number 6 for the Sydney Swans. Played 106 games for Sydney, then came to Geelong where he's played a further 71. A lot of knockers based on his poor record in big finals, and we mean grand finals because he played quite a few at Sydney and then came to the Cats and has played in a few as well. But he finally got his premiership medallion this year when the Cats won the 2022 premiership. He's played 177 games and kicked 189 goals. That's a pretty fair career. 2010, another workhorse with selection number 6 to Richmond, Reece Conker. Played 151 games for both the Tigers and Fremantle. He's a life member at Richmond with 104 games. Missed out on their dynasty. Couldn't break into the Tigers team in 2017. Came back the following year in 2018. Played in the losing prelim against the Pies. Then decided to head west and go to the West Coast. Go to Fremantle as a free agent, and missed out on a couple of premierships at Richmond. He was a Western Australian. I remember him, not fondly, but I remember him being a Carlton supporter for tearing his hamstring quite badly, in fact, in the opening quarter of the 2013 elimination final. 2011, Chad Wingard, who I thought was a superstar at Port Adelaide. I thought he was going to be... He just hasn't quite captured what he showed early in his career, and he certainly hasn't shown it at Hawthorn. He's been okay at the Hawks, but nowhere near what he produced early in his career. But he's still racked up 204 games and 291 goals. 147 of those games and 232 goals were with the Power. He was a 2 times All-Australian at Port Adelaide. He was a best and fairest winner there, and he won the Mark of the Year in 2014. Let's continue with selection number 6 with the notable mentions. I'm going to mention Sam Petreski-Seton as a notable mention because he's played 100 games of AFL football. Disappointing. Had some talent at the Blues, particularly early. Amassed 35 disposals when he played on the ball in a game against the Western Bulldogs for Carlton, but fell out of favour. Played in defence, and then he wanted to go home to Western Australia and ended up back at the Eagles this year, where he really did struggle. He's played, as I said, he's played 107 games, 91 of those with the Blues. He's still on an AFL list. Newbies, Jaden Stevenson, probably could be nearly a notable. 74 games, 93 goals with both Collingwood and North. AFL Rising Star in 2018. Part of the Collingwood's losing 2018 grand final. He set the crowd alight with a couple of goals in the first quarter. He was on fire. Became part of like a betting scandal. Started to get into strife in 2018. Traded to North, where once again he's had further controversies follow him, including being hospitalised after He shouldn't laugh after crashing his mountain bike while drinking, and fractured his hip. 2018, so I reckon the best ever may come from one of this group. I don't think it's going to be Jaden Stevenson. It could be, though, Ben King. Gold Coast Suns, 53 games, 89 goals, and did his ACL at the start of this year. Fingers crossed he can come back. Don't think it's going to be Fisher McSay. It's been disappointing at Adelaide, just the 10 games. I did read recently he's taken some time away from the game. 220, Denver Granger Barras, really good, hard, tough key defender for the Hawks from Western Australia. He's played 21 games. And I think Joshua Shelley could be anything for Adelaide. 13 games and 17 goals in his debut season for Adelaide. It was really good early. But the winner, the best ever, pick number 6 in the history of the VFL/AFL draft 1986 through to 2021 is Jackson Macrae. 2012, selection number 6 at the Footscray Football Club. Oakley Chargers, Carey Grammer, start in a TAC Cup Grand Final for the Oakley Chargers. I think he may have even kicked the goal that won in the game, and he really put his name up in lights. And the doggies swooped on him with selection number 6. He's been a fine player since he arrived at the Whitten Oval. You look at top 10 draft picks. He's a classic top 10 draft pick. Is he, when you look at that, the best ever? It's a fraction disappointing, I would have thought. But I still really rate him. He's a huge ball winner, accumulator, reads the play beautifully, generally uses the ball okay on his left peg. 3 times All-Australian, premiership player in 2016, 208 games. And the big one for me, other than the 3 All-Australians and the premiership player, was in 2021, last year, he was the Gary Ayres medalist as the best player in the finals across the whole finals. He's a big game player. He's a very consistent footballer. So he's the best ever at selection number 6. So Dangerfield 10, Pike 9, Bartel 8, Selwood 7, Macrae 6. And the reorder, the My Blue Heaven Power Rankings, we go Pike stays at 10. So he drifted. Pike, he drifted. He went from 9 to 10. Macrae, unfortunately, he slips. He slips from selection number 6. He's going up into 9. Bartel goes back to selection number 8. Jimmy will be happy with that, okay, because he went up to selection number 9, but he goes back to 8. Dangerfield, he goes down to 7. He's dropping. And our man, Joel Selwood, he's 7 into 6. What do you think, guys? Did I get it right? Speak soon. We've got selection number 5 coming up shortly.